Good evening, citizens of Portsmouth, invited guests, city staff, council members on the dais, Mr. Manager, Ms. City Attorney, Ms. Clerk. It's good to see everybody. We will begin our public work session. I would ask that all of my colleagues please note your attendance electronically.
5 members of City Council are present.
Thank you, ma'am. Now we will move on to the work session, and Manager Carter, sir, you have the floor.
Thank you, Mayor. Greetings, Mayor, Vice Mayor, Council, colleagues to my left, and all the city staff. Thank you for being here this evening. We have a few items to present to you this evening. One is pertaining to the request to bring some information back about the entertainment and banquet halls. We're going to have our Parks and Recreation Director, Mr. Mark Palmanchuk, after that to bring an update on what's happening in the Parks and Recreation world. And finally, we're going to have the City Assessor bring us some information about the open space policy. Now, this particular presentation is not property specific. We're not talking about anybody that that's under that process right now. This is just some general information, actually that Dr. Whitaker had asked about, so that we could make a decision on whether or not that's actually something we want to continue doing. All right, but that doesn't have anything to do with any particular property. This is just a generic presentation. First, Dr. Russell, if you are ready, she's going to talk to us about event space.
Good evening.
Good evening, Dr.
Good evening,
Russell.
council members. Good evening, Mrs. Graham-Williams and colleagues, as well as citizens that are present. I am Rhonda Russell, and I serve as your planning director. And at your September meeting, council members asked if staff would provide a work session on the topic of event centers in the city of Portsmouth, specifically related to permitting for this use. And we believe that that request was due in part to the recent number of event venue applications that have been submitted for new business starts in Portsmouth. You will recall, or you may recall, that at your September 10th meeting, a speaker reported a listing of event venues that included both entertainment venues. And that number of venues that was presented was around 11. Staff's research for this work session this evening included a review of our permitting history over the last 24 months. And we believe there is some confusion about the entertainment venue as well as the event center venue. And so I want to start with just a brief explanation of the differences between the two. And so we're hopeful that the pictures of local venues will help clarify the differences between our event center venue as well as our entertainment venue. The City of Portsmouth zoning ordinance defines an event space banquet hall, and I will read verbatim, as an establishment that is rented by individuals or groups to accommodate private functions. Such a use may include a kitchen facility for the preparation or catering of food, the sale or service of alcoholic beverages for on-premise consumption only, and outdoor gardens or reception facilities. The luxury affairs business and the Victory Crossing Shopping Center is an example of this type of use. The entertainment establishment is defined in our ordinance as a use that offers some form of entertainment, such as dancing, comedy performances, or presenting music that involves human interaction, such as a disc jockey, karaoke, and live music. Such an establishment can apply for an ABC license to serve alcohol, and the use excludes adult entertainment establishments. Also excluded are locations with single event ABC licenses. And so the Rivers Casino, California Burrito, and on Airline Boulevard, and the Book Club on High Street, as well as Time on the River at 1 High Street, are examples of the entertainment venue. The key differences in the specific types of use are live entertainment, not the alcohol sales piece, because the event center can have alcohol sales, but the licensee for those sales is the lessee who is leasing the space for an event. Our entertainment venue definition, we have 3 examples that I actually just shared with you: the California Burrito, Time on the River, and the Book Club. And if you're like me, my thoughts were, well, how are those entertainment venues? I've visited Time on the River a couple of times, and that just presents like a restaurant. And so it caused me to take pause for a moment and go back and pull those permits to look at the permitting language. And so California Burrito, for example, is a venue that was permitted to operate an entertainment establishment as part of their restaurant use. Time on the River at 1 High Street offers and was permitted to offer karaoke on a weekly basis in the evenings, as well as live music inside the restaurant, and the applicant can also have small live bands with string instruments on their outside patio during the spring and summer seasons. The Book Club at 620 High Street, that was actually mentioned recently as a permitted activity, is permitted to operate as an entertainment establishment, and their activities also include karaoke, blues night, neo soul themed music events, and other live entertainment from local artists. And additional permitting activities include a retail bookstore and a restaurant, as well as a meeting space for book club meetings, story time, and artistic restaurants. So in comparison, our event space definition, most recently, council considered and approved these 3. 507 Williamsburg Avenue for an event space, 465 Dinwiddie Street, a use permit to operate an event space in an existing building, and 3282 Academy Avenue, the most recent, an event space at a shopping center. The distinguished differences between these venues, which are the event space venues and the entertainment, is the absence of live entertainment. I want to share with you, and this was actually surprising. It was surprising to me. We wanted to look at the location for these venues, and it has been suggested, and I actually agreed that perhaps this was the case, that we have permitted quite a few event venues in the city of Portsmouth. But we did a look back over about 24 months of the venues that have come forward for your consideration and review by staff, the Planning Commission, and ultimately approved by the City Council. And this is what we found. The activity is actually recent, within the last quarter. Over the last 24 months, 4 event center venues have been permitted in the city of Portsmouth, and 4 entertainment center venues have been permitted. The 4 event centers does include 1 that was denied, and that was most recently, and that was the George Washington Highway venue. We actually cross-referenced the approved centers with police activity as well, and we found that that activity is also infrequent. And so with respect to the event centers, we've only seen 3 police reports, and those were for disturbances. And for the entertainment venues, the cross-reference showed 4 police reports, most of which were for noise citations, noise ordinance citations, 1 for disturbance and 1 for vandalism. Okay, go on to the next one. As part of our review, we also wanted to survey our neighboring localities for how the other of urban cities regulate our event space venues. And so we surveyed Norfolk, Hampton, and Newport News. And what we found is that all four of us regulate event center venues with some type of additional land use permit. The only difference is that there's the number of patrons served. There's a limited number that is permitted by right before a conditional use permit is required. That number is very low. It's trending around 25, where in Portsmouth, if the use is proposed with those types of operations, then a CUP, conditional use permit, is automatically required. And so what the conditional use permit tool does is permit a site-specific evaluation of a vendor's proposal for a use at a specific property, and we have the opportunity to consider if conditions are warranted to mitigate any potential off-site impacts of the use at that location that might make it otherwise acceptable when it's not acceptable. So the other resource that staff considered from the American Planning Association has a service called the Planning Advisory Service, which by subscription we can access and look at nationally how other communities and other regions regulate uses that we're very familiar with, or uses that might be new and we're not familiar with. So I'll get a perfect example of that would be wind towers, which is relatively new and upcoming, and most ordinances don't address that. And what we found were some best practices for permitting the group of uses that we call event centers, banquet halls, and entertainment venues. And I'd like to say that based on the review, we're doing a lot of things correctly. But we did learn some things that we can incorporate into our review as it relates to both hours of operation and a provision to revoke permits if there is a pattern of inconsistency or noncompliance with the conditions. And so those best practices are to include conditions related to prescriptive definition for what activities and what uses are permitted, to include for all permits a prescriptive set of hours of operation, and if a particular vendor wants hours of operation outside of that prescriptive window, then in addition to that conditional use permit, they would be required to get a special events permit for a one-time event or for a seasonal event. So, for example, you recall in my early comments about time on the river, they want to be able to do the outside music, live music on their patio during the spring and summer months. That was what we call a seasonal period for outdoor activity. And staff would recommend that we deploy or implement that recommendation immediately as it relates to applications for CUPs going forward. There's a recommendation for capacity limits that we do anyway by virtue of our permitting process through our building office. We have a noise ordinance, and so we can reference that in the conditions, but that would apply regardless. We already evaluate our conditional use permit applications for parking and traffic impact. We do need to include a provision for inclusion of a safety plan to address security and crowd management as a standard item in the conditions for this type of use, and we will do that going forward. Locally, we do not regulate alcohol service, but we're comfortable with how that is regulated by state permits. Trash and waste management, we do evaluate that. You'll recognize that most of our applications have been for existing commercial spaces, and because they are existing commercial spaces, by virtue of our permitting and site plan process, they do have already addressed provisions for trash and waste management. And the compliance with fire and safety codes would be protected by virtue of our permitting process through our permitting and buildings department. And so with that, I am available to answer any questions from the council as I am directed.
I believe Dr. Whitaker was first and then Councilman Hugel.
Yes, thank you, Dr. Russell, for the presentation. I'm a little curious why we're even at this point with the discussion that we're having, and I know it was not initiated by you, but by some, I think, unfounded concerns of council. When we see these 11 items for best practices that we're taking into account, how does this differ when you're looking at event space? How does that differ from what you would assess with a regular restaurant?
Let me look at them.
I'm just, the restaurant has to get a permit.
So oftentimes a restaurant is a by right use. Hours of operation for restaurants would be impacted by alcohol sales,
Okay.
I believe. So that's not locally controlled. Capacity limits would be the same. Noise ordinance would be the same. Mr. Whitaker, Dr. Whitaker, Councilman Whitaker, actually, I think the noise control leads me to think that that might be a difference because of the entertainment. So a restaurant could not have live entertainment, which could result in more noise unless they had the CUP for an entertainment venue to accompany it.
Okay.
So that is the only one that I see
Yeah.
that would be different.
Yeah, I really don't see why we're even having all this much of a discussion from council. I think that from our last council meeting, many of the characterizations of the event space that were being discussed, I thought that they were not based on any type of data that we had pertaining to how event spaces have operated. I thought that there were a lot of cold, racist language that was being used. And I don't see why there's this great concern now for doing something that it seems like the process that you have already been incorporating has already been adequate. And I'm really trying to find in this discussion what is the concern of council and why is it that this type of entity is being brought when we have other entities across the city that may not be exactly the same, but they attract people, and I didn't see these type of characterizations or concerns placed upon them. So I really don't see what the additional regulating that is needed here. So I'm interested in hearing from council on that. So it's really not a question to you, it's just a concern that I have that it appears that certain type of organizations are being questioned a little deeper than we normally do. And I just want to point that out, that that is something that's obviously being done.
Thank you, sir. Our next speaker is Councilman Hugel. Sir, you have the floor.
Yeah, thanks, Mr. Mayor. Maybe this will help Councilman Whitaker. So my recollection from our discussion was that in the event space applications that we're seeing, there is no condition placed on hours of operation. And because they're not regulated by ABC, there's no existing criteria for hours of operation. Is that true?
It was, it's partially correct.
Okay.
We weren't consistent in applying a condition for hours of operation. So if an applicant in their narrative included information about their desired hours of operation, then staff repeated that information in the conditions recommended.
Okay, so I think at least the one that we looked at the last council meeting that carried over from the meeting before, the applicant indicated hours of operation, but that was not listed as a condition. And then you all added it as a condition when we looked at it this past meeting and okayed it. And so I think just being consistent and being fair for every event space applicant, if there's no state code or city code that says these are the hours that you're allowed to operate inside of, then we ought to be consistent so that if the owner doesn't specify hours of operation in their application, then we should figure that out with them. And if they do specify, then it ought to be considered as a condition. You mentioned when you were talking about best practice sample conditions that you're also looking at adding a safety plan. So that hasn't been part of our review process up until now, is that true?
No, the language, we included language requiring video, a continuous
Right.
video of activity on the premises. And that predates me, but I'm sure that was intended as a safety feature. And so a proactive discussion regarding the safety plan and crowd control is a best practice that I believe we should implement.
Okay. And does that need to be implemented by our action or can be implemented by your folks?
My comment is intended to mean it's my recommendation that we include that as a condition consistently in these types of applications.
Okay, thank you. And then regarding alcohol service, so if it's an entertainment venue, then ABC has oversight of, are we playing by the alcohol management rules? You said, I think, that in the case of event space, that the lessee is responsible to manage alcohol. So who checks to make sure that the lessee is ensuring that underage people are not being allowed to consume alcohol at an event space event?
So my opinion is that the safety plan that is recommended as a condition and that the applicant would have to submit would address their application process, their lessee agreement, and we would be looking for language that would be advising patrons of that requirement.
Okay, so that's for things going forward, but for the
Yes.
event spaces that we already have in place, who's supposed to be checking to see that the rules are being followed? The alcohol consumption, really, I guess it's state law, right?
I believe that's correct.
So who checks? Do we have a compliance group that goes in to check event space compliance to state law, or is it the lessee that's on the hook to check?
Mr. Carter, you have the floor, sir.
Yes, sir. Other than our law enforcement, that's not locally controlled by us. ABC actually takes care of that. They do those spot checks. They're the ones that's issuing the license, so they're the ones who are responsible for compliance of the license.
Yeah, but I'm talking about event spaces where they don't issue the license, right? There's no ABC license associated with event spaces, it's only with entertainment. And so if the lessee is the ABC licensing agent, if you will, I guess it's on the lessee, but how do we know that the lessee is even there when there are events happening, except to unlock the door and lock it up after they leave?
Well, I think we're kind of getting confused as to what the lessee is here. We're talking about not the event space owner, but the person who's renting it that night. They're the ones who's going to apply for the license. The license is going to be in their name for that night. Not the person that owned the building is going to come back and lock it up. The license won't be in their name.
Okay, and the lessee has to get an ABC license for their event?
If they're going to serve alcohol at that event.
Okay.
Only if they're going to serve alcohol.
All right, got it, thanks.
Okay.
Councilman Moody, sir, you have the floor.
Thank you, Mayor. Thanks for the presentation. My concern at the last meeting was hours of operation. I think you've addressed that. I think hours of operation is certainly not a racist thing. I think it's a protection thing for the communities where these special events facilities are located. And in some way, it also protects the operator of those facilities. You know, if you lease your facility to someone and they have a large crowd there, and you don't have the law backing you up that we have to close at 1 o'clock or 12 o'clock or whatever the condition we deem appropriate, then they're on their own. But when they have the enforcement of law or condition, I think that helps them control the situation as well, because a lot of the large groups can get unruly, especially when alcohol is being served. So I think the condition for hours is a protection for both parties in some respects, and certainly for the area in which the facility is located. So I think we'd be remiss not to include that as a condition.
Thank you, sir. Vice Mayor Lucas Burke, ma'am, you have the floor.
Thank you, Mayor, and thank you, Dr. Russell, for the presentation. Just a question about the use of banquet halls and entertainment venues. Are these related to nightclubs as well, or is that the same use, or is it a different use?
Oftentimes, the entertainment venue is a nightclub operation. The event center or event venue is not.
Okay, all right. And then the conditions relative to the hours of operation, noise control, and the use of alcohol. So are we looking to have a policy put in place that would restrict any of those, or was that just common topics?
So let me get back to that.
Okay,
So the Portsmouth has a noise ordinance, and so my vision is that we would repeat the noise ordinance in the conditions for the conditional use permit. Alcohol, I
It's under
needed
the
some
use of
feedback
it.
from, but that's not controlled locally. And so that we would defer to the state for those licensing and permitting requirements. And so I think you said 3. You
Yeah,
said noise, alcohol.
and the hours of operation, I see when we related these to the 3 in the neighboring localities, Hampton has generally restricted from 6 a.m. to 1 a.m. So are
Yes.
we looking for any specific times?
We'll have a prescriptive time frame. The permits, at the far end was 12 a.m.
Okay.
And so my thoughts are 12 a.m. as the upper limit, and then any time frame above that would be a special events permit for a one-time use, or my thoughts are it could be seasonal. The time on the river actually enlightened me that that's probably appropriate, is if you're doing it, 2 nights a month over the summer season. A special events permit for that period is likely more appropriate for a longer time frame.
Right, okay. And the conditional use permit, is that what they apply for, or does it only become a conditional use permit when they're applying for a banquet and entertainment space?
All applicants, our current ordinance said they would require a conditional use permit for the use.
For that type of use?
Either the event center or the entertainment
Right. Okay,
use
those two.
requires a CUP.
Okay,
Yes.
and is this related to like backyard parties, the noise ordinance? And is it a time limit on that? Is it like 11 or 12 or?
So we do have a local noise ordinance. This isn't, so a permit is not required for a graduation party or
Right.
that's not required today. Our local noise ordinance, I would need some help with that.
I think somebody said 11 o'clock, I don't know.
Some,
Okay, we'll find out. All right.
Okay, we'll get back
Thank you
back
so
with you on
much.
that.
Appreciate it.
Thank you, ma'am. Next speaker is Councilman Barnes, Councilman Tillage, and then we'll come back to Dr. Whitaker.
Thank you. I think it's important that we understand what an event space is. The majority of the time when somebody rents an event space, they're not having a crazy party that's going to lead to fights and shootings and things like that. Have we ever had any of those incidents at any of the event spaces?
We've had disturbances and
Killings and things of that nature?
nothing violent, no.
So I rent event spaces all the time for banquets for kids, different things of that nature. And when you rent those things, it's really for what it is an event, because you can't find a proper space to hold those type of events. Some places probably when they're getting married or things like that, they might have alcohol and stuff, but I don't think nobody's getting killed at a wedding reception or a funeral reception or something like that. I just think that we got to make sure that we understand the difference between, and we don't have a lot of those issues either, but a lounge or a club opposed to an event space. And I think we're generalizing this as one of those, a club or something like that, where those type of things may happen. But when it comes to an event space, we are really not having those type of issues. People specifically want those event spaces for certain things, and they have to pay a lot of money. You pay by the hour, so you're not you're not renting those spaces so that you can have something that where they're gonna go crazy and shoot each other or whatever the case. Because I heard some of that characterization in the last meeting when I watched it online. I just think we just got to be careful, and also, I mean, I'm not for some of these time restrictions, because again, if you know the events, if you ever been to an event space, you ever rented something, for the most part, they're not going to 2 o'clock in the morning, 3 o'clock in the morning, even 1 o'clock in the morning. Those you rent by the hour, and the later it get, the higher it gets. Which the higher it gets, the less likely that you're trying to have something crazy that's going to turn out there. So I just want to make sure that we be careful of how we characterize stuff. I think it was, from what I hear, because it started not last meeting, the meeting before, that we were getting too many people requesting event spaces. Just know that that's how those people make their money. I'm more concerned about the many storage facilities and the one that we got coming up, and the car washes that all the car washes that we have. That's what we should be concerned about as a council, and building those on spaces where we have prime land and things of that nature.
Thank you, sir. Councilman Tillage, sir, you have the floor.
Thank you, Mayor. Dr. Russell, thank you for the presentation. I think it is important to have uniform regulations so that, different applicants are not getting different set of rules. So I do appreciate us taking that approach. You made mention when we were talking about special events in the 12 a.m. I know you were talking about, potential proposals, but you made mention to special events. People will be able to apply for a special events permit for a one-time use if they go beyond 12 a.m. But nightclubs fall in entertainment, and most nightclubs go until ABC cutoff, which is at 2 a.m. So when we propose those, if we can just keep that in mind, because we don't want to limit those businesses either. But I guess maybe more for
The event center.
event center, not so
Yes.
much entertainment venue, because the casino also goes until 2 a.m. as far as ABC is concerned. So,
Yes,
okay.
that's exactly what.
All right, guys,
staff
just want to
recommend.
clarify that.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, sir. Dr. Whitaker, sir, you have the floor.
Yes, sir. Dr. Russell, my question was along the hours of operation as well. So with the, what you're recommending as a 12 midnight cutoff time for event space rental,
Yes.
what would be the justification for that?
Those that have, so we've had 5 in 24 months, and the upper limit of the applications that have come in have been 12 midnight. And so staff's recommendation is that we have a prescriptive window for hours of operation for the event center with a provision that should a vendor want to go beyond that, that they apply for a special event permit at one time or a window of time.
So when, when those event space use permits came through, were those the times that the applicants recommended, or was that recommended by staff?
The applicants.
Right, so that would give even more credence to allowing for the flexibility for the applicants to determine that, because the purpose of the event space, and you have it listed in here, is the flexibility of it. And so, to me, it just seems like it's really not founded on anything other than we've had applications come in, and that's what the applicants say, so therefore that's what we're going to do. And it appears that if you go to this special permitting, that's adding an additional layer to the process that really doesn't need to be there. And I would think that because of the nature of what these particular properties represent, that we would allow for the flexibility to be put in place. And if anything, as was mentioned earlier, if there is any limit placed on it, it should be consistent with what is being done presently with the 2 a.m. Time periods. But I really think we're raising an unnecessary issue here because of the type of properties that we have here. Also, the issue of safety control. The safety control issue within the use permit application, those persons would, or business companies, they would indicate within the use permit what they are putting in place safety-wise.
We're going to make that an administrative requirement that they address their safety plan
Okay.
in their applications.
And so for other businesses that, I'm thinking restaurants, is that something that they're required to do as well?
Most of the time, a restaurant is permitted as a by right use, so there's not an additional layer of review.
So, right, so there's no safety concern, safety control issue with those type of businesses?
No additional, no, sir.
Right. So why is it for the event space?
Well, it's recommended as a best practice going forward, specifically to address issues related to crowd control and management.
So with the nightclubs and the other organizations, that are all of these organizations by right?
No.
Okay, so
No, sir. The nightclubs would be permitted with the entertainment permit.
so are they required to have a safety control measure?
I would have to check on that, Councilman Whitaker. I believe with the, I'm not sure.
Okay.
I just, the private security is the piece that
Yeah.
I'm not sure of.
Again, my concern is there appears to be a higher level of scrutiny that's being applied to event space because of some concerns that were really unfounded. If it's intended, according to this outline, for event spaces to have flexibility, then you would expect that flexibility to also be seen with the hours of operation. And so if you're going to require these things like a safety control, if you're going to do that for the event space, I would think that that would be something that would be consistent across the board instead of singling out these event space operations.
Thank you, sir. Councilman Barnes, sir, you have the floor.
So again, to go back to the hours of operations, I'm not, especially with the 12 a.m. thing, I think we should be flexible and kind of give you an example. During the prom season, I promised last year that since that none of the high schools had after parties for the students, to keep them in one spot, to keep them out of trouble, I was gonna have the official after prom party for all the high schools. They're gonna be out late regardless. So one of the things that I wanted to do to kind of control, to make sure they're not getting in trouble, is to have that party. And the prom's over about 10 or 11 o'clock, so we're gonna be out probably 2 in the morning. If we put that stipulation on it, we're kind of putting people who are in situations that try to help our children or help people to stay out of trouble. You're putting them in a bind because we won't be able to do those things without getting that special permit. And it's not going to be any alcohol or anything like that. It's just simple, just to give them somewhere to party and have fun, but also keep them out of trouble. So I just think we just gotta, we characterize it a certain way and think that because something's late that it means trouble or something bad is gonna happen. But I'm telling you what the type of things that can happen. I'm going to be renting an event space for that event. I made the promise this year during prom season, so I gotta fulfill that promise because people are gonna hold me on that. But I just think that we need to make sure that these event spaces, because again, is an event space. We need to make sure that we understand what that really is and what that really means. And actually, maybe some of us should visit some of them and see what really goes on there, because they're normally for special events. Nobody is renting those places to have any type of event where there's going to be violence and craziness going on. It costs too much money to do that. And again, it's an event space. It's not a party hall. It's normally the after party of some type of event, some type of special event that's happening, a banquet, a reception, or things like that. If you know anything about me, for the last 15 years, I have rented event spaces for children to have special events, and we've never had any of these things occur that I heard that's going to occur at these places. And I have kids who probably a little bit more wild than the adults.
Sir, Mr. Moody, sir, you have the floor.
My question, the building, whether it's a new building or an existing building where the uses change, isn't a CO required?
Yes, sir.
So, and the fire marshal would set the occupancy level?
Building official?
Yeah.
Building official?
Yeah. So that in itself would be part of that safety net to ensure that, the building's not going to be over-occupied. So is that the case with the ones that we've recently approved?
The certificate of occupancy and?
Yeah.
Yes, sir. It is.
Okay. Thanks.
This is, since we've all been around and I think we've asked all the questions, this will be the last question because we have other agenda items. So this will be the last question on this item so that we can move forward.
It's not a question, it's just a comment to what Councilman Moody just raised. That's the point I'm making. We already have things in place. I don't see the need for any higher level of scrutiny on the event space.
Thank you, sir. And with that, Dr. Russell, City Manager Carter, want to thank you all for bringing back this information. I think that it certainly was a robust discussion, and ultimately, if there's a recommendation, it will be brought before council, and a consideration will be made as it relates to that recommendation from the city manager.
Thank you, Dr. Russell. And this was just informational. We're not looking for any policy changes or anything. This was purely informational.
Correct.
All right.
Thank you.
All right. Mark, you ready?
City Manager Carter, you have the floor, sir.
Thank you, sir. Mark Palmachuk is going to come and provide us a Parks and Recreation update, and give us some insight on what's going on, what's being accomplished, and what our future looks like. Mark?
Thank you. Good evening, Mayor, Vice Mayor, members of council. I appreciate the opportunity to be in front of you tonight to give you a little update on what's going on in Parks and Recreation. This presentation will be a brief overview of any currently completed projects, projects that are in process right now, also projects that will be planned for the very near future, and then a small briefing on programmatic updates. First off is the Neighborhood Facility Recreation Center, is one of our most recently completed projects. This is the Recreation Center on Elm Avenue. It's roughly a 29,000 square foot facility. It was built in 1934 as the National Guard Armory, and is open to the public as a recreation center in 1980. We've recently completed renovations, including the entire building exterior. The HVAC system got a complete overhaul, along with a new roof over the entire facility, lighting upgrades, plumbing upgrades, floors, ceilings, and walls. In addition, also the front restrooms at that facility. As we got into this process, as you would expect with any older facility, we discovered things as we went along the way, which increased the scope of work. So all totaled, it was roughly $2.5 million to complete these renovations using CDBG money, Community Development Block Grant funds. And that was the first phase. And I'm happy to say that just this year, 2023 awards were done this year in 2024 for the Virginia Rec and Park Society, and we won Best Renovation for Brick and Mortar Building. We do have other renovations planned for this facility. In the second phase, it will include upgrading the kitchen, the locker rooms in the back of the building, as well as the restrooms in the back of the gymnasium. We anticipate construction starting in FY of '26. Another recently completed project is the Bidewee and CityLink greens. These greens were renovated. There was 20 of them at Bidewee and 10 of them at CityLinks. We went from traditional bent grass greens to what's called Champions Turf. It's a very new green that has come out and is cultivated specifically for golf courses. Previously, the greens were renovated over 20 years ago, so they were in dire need. And I'm happy to say that because of the expertise of the staff we had out there, and because of this very new process called a no-till renovation process, we saved tens of thousands of dollars on this facility, on the renovations. Total cost was about $188,000 using CIP funding. We also have phase 2 coming for Bidewee, which will include the cart paths and the pro shop restrooms. Another recently completed project is Highland and Lansing Park. This is one of our neighborhood parks. It's approximately 28,500 square feet. It is located at the corner of Highland and Lansing Streets in the Brighton neighborhood. And phase 1 of the renovations, they have been completed and include a full-size outdoor basketball court, along with drainage and fencing along the perimeter of that facility. Phase 2, we will begin hopefully here shortly, and will include replacing the playground. We did work in conjunction with Brighton Prentice Park Civic League to determine what amenities we needed out there, and total cost was roughly $303,000, again in CDBG funding. We have several projects currently underway. One of them, another larger neighborhood park, is 8th and Jefferson Park. And it is about 88,000 square feet park at the corner of 8th and Jefferson Streets, and this is in the South Side neighborhood. Phase 1 renovations are nearly complete. We're not done yet, but they do include a paved walking track along the perimeter, fencing around the entire park, as well as a full-size basketball court, and some drainage improvements as well. We, of course, worked in conjunction with the local civic league there, the Madison Ward Civic League, to determine what amenities they would like. Again, we used CDBG funding for this. A little over $500,000 was spent. Phase 2 for this project should be starting here soon as well, and will include a picnic shelter and replacing the playground. We also have a project going on out at City Park right now. We've recently completed renovating the pavilion area, the exterior of it, and are currently planning and designing phase 2, which will include the restrooms, the main restrooms at that park, as well as the pro shop. We are focusing on ADA renovations as well as exterior and interior renovations to those facilities. Some larger planned projects coming up, thanks to council. One that we're very excited about is Charles Pete Little League. This is a very large parcel, approximately 460,000 square feet, at the corner of Elliott Ave and Deep Creek Boulevard. It is in the Highland Biltmore neighborhood. We work in conjunction with this Charles Pete Little League Board to determine what we needed to do to make sure this is as fully functioning as a Little League complex as possible. Anticipated costs are roughly $5.2 million using ARPA funding. Scope of work is extensive, and it includes increasing from the 2 current fields there now to 4 fields. One of them will be a 300-foot senior field. In addition, we will be replacing the concession stand, include an outdoor covered pavilion, and all of the fields will have lighting. We will also have a press box on top of the concession stand to be able to announce during games. Anticipated timeline is for the bid to go out this month, with bids open in November, awarded by December, and construction starting in the spring. And we have been in talk with Ms. Edwards with the Little League Board, so she is aware of what this timeline is. And just so you can kind of see what the scope of work will be, give a little more context. Currently on the left of the screen is what is the aerial of what it is now, which is just 2 small 200-foot fields. There is some gravel parking there as well. And on the right, you will see 3 200-foot fields, the 300-foot senior field I mentioned, and there will be increased parking and also some drainage and stormwater improvements to include BMPs. Another major project coming up, which we will definitely need council feedback and approval on, is Maplewood Park. This is approximately 79,000 square foot park located at the corner of Portsmouth Boulevard and Truxton Avenue. A lot of people know where this is because it also shares a site with the Olympian Sports Club. We have recently received a Virginia Outdoors Foundation grant for the amount of $376,000. We also have CDBG funding scheduled for this in the amount of $375,000. Scope of work will include 2 full-size basketball courts, ADA paved paths throughout the park so we can make sure everyone can enjoy it. Areas of the park will also include stormwater improvements, parking lot improvements, a playground, and a memorial garden. The one thing we need to bring to council's attention, and it should be on the agenda for the next council meeting, is the Virginia Outdoors Foundation grant does require an easement to be put on that property. This easement is a deed of conveyance, which would convey that we do not turn this into anything else but a park in the future, and also that we do not subdivide this property. Without that funding, we would have to go back to the drawing board and probably do this in phases. The timeline is to advertise this in October, award by December, and anticipate construction beginning in January and hopefully ending in April. Just for more context, this is currently what Maplewood Park looks like from above. You can see a very small basketball court in the lower right-hand corner. The Olympian Sports Club building is at the top right-hand corner, and just a lot of open green space. Plans will include, as I said, the 2 outdoor basketball courts we see up there in the left-hand corner, improved parking, playground area, the memorial garden area, and we plan to keep the current basketball court there and repurpose it for other uses. Additional projects upcoming are the Cavalier Manor Recreation Center. This is a recreation center located at 404 Viking Street. It is approximately a 17,500 square foot facility. It includes 2 separate buildings. It has a rec center and a gymnasium. This was a former Norfolk County public school in the 1950s. Renovations will address ADA accessibility throughout both buildings, exterior repairs and painting, replacing of both roofs, floors, ceiling, restrooms, walls, and locker room upgrades as well. The gym floor will also be included in those renovations. We are in the preliminary stages. However, we did just get the agreement signed, so we're looking to get that started here hopefully in the next couple of months. The anticipated cost for the renovations is roughly $811,000. Another recreation center that we have, actually, this is our, believe it or not, our newest recreation center that was built. Was built in 1979. It's a Joseph E. Parker Recreation Center. It is a 14,500 square foot facility located at 2430 Turnpike Road. Renovations will address similar things as the Cavalier Manor one. It will include exterior repairs and painting, the floors, ceiling, restrooms and locker rooms, the gym floor, and lighting upgrades. Again, we are in preliminary stages working on the final design for this. Anticipated costs at this time are roughly $524,000, and that is excluding the gym floor, which will be done separately. Lastly, a brief update on some recently added programs. We acknowledge and understand that we can't have a brick and mortar recreation facility in every part of the city. So roughly 4 years ago, we started looking at other alternatives, and partnerships are really what came forward. Partnerships with PRHA, with Portsmouth Public Schools, and with London Oaks. So we're trying to go out to where our citizens are and meet them there. Some of our programs, one of the newer ones is called Schoolhouse Rec. So we are operating at 4 elementary schools throughout the city, Churchton Elementary and Churchton Primary, Craddock Elementary, and also Waterview Elementary. And we are operating these just as they are recreation centers. So when schools are not in use, our staff comes in and are able to take care of the gymnasium and a few different classrooms to offer the same programs and activities that you would see in our recreation centers. The same time frames occur as well. We're open Monday through Thursday from immediately after school until 8 p.m. On Fridays, immediately after school until 7, and then on Saturdays from 12 to 6. And again, all this takes is registering your child. There is no cost to attend these programs. Lastly, I would like to highlight our instructional division, which came about roughly in 2021. These are programs that we're also, again, partnering with those same folks, PRHA, London Oaks, and Portsmouth Public Schools, to be able to offer recreation enrichment programs. Some of these programs include gardening, photography, clothing design, computers, STEM, entrepreneurship, and many others. We currently are in locations which include Lexington, Dale Homes, London Oaks, and several of the schools. And with that, that concludes my presentation. I'm happy to answer any questions.
Barnes, sir, you have the floor.
I have 2 questions. One, as it pertains to the Charles Pete Little League complex. You said that the renovation starts in the spring, which is baseball season. Where would they be moved to for the baseball season?
So we have offered them several locations to move for that season. One would be Wilson Little League, to share that with Wilson Little League. We also have St. Julian's Creek Annex, which is going unused currently. So we're giving them the option to see what would best fit their needs.
Definitely, because I'm super excited about this Charles Pete Little League complex, because Miss Edwards, when I first got on council, she came to me about this. So this was something that I pushed for, and I never personally played in Charles Pete Little League, but I know a lot of people who did, and actually my son played in Charles Pete Little League, so I'm very happy for that. I talked to Miss Edwards, she's my neighbor, so I talk to her all the time about it, and she is super excited. That's all she talks about when she see me. If I'm outside standing, she stops the car, and she the one showed me the drawings and stuff. She pulled it out her car and showed it to me, so she's super excited about this, and I'm happy for them. This one doesn't pertain to anything that's on this sheet, but I know it's part of Parks and Rec as far as the Churchland facility. And I know we've started renovation, and we placed new goals like the citizens asked for in that area. The one thing that they did ask me, and they're watching it now, so they just sent me a message about it. They wanted to know why that they didn't get the same goals as like the other places, like the Bernard Griffin Park and all those areas.
Those are actually on back order, and that's a great question. And we didn't want to wait for those to come in to be able to start the renovations. So they are on back order. When they come in, they will be replaced.
Okay, thank you. So I'm gonna go ahead and respond to this message and let them know.
Dr. Whitaker, you have the floor, sir.
Yes, Mr. Pomajek, appreciate the presentation. Where are we on the plan for the facility for the sportsplex? There was probably about 3 years ago, maybe we received some drawings, and there was some discussion on actually putting in place a recreation plan. And I noticed the sportsplex isn't mentioned here, and it was actually, we were looking at state-of-the-art type of facility there. Has there been any further discussion on that? Do we know where we are with that?
Unfortunately not. We were never given the go-ahead to proceed with looking into that. As of right now, we just have the one half of the complex that we're using, with the other half more or less vacant.
Yeah, I would hope that council, we can direct the city manager to move forward with the plans and looking into. We had a presentation that was given on that whole development of the sportsplex, and what is there is inadequate. Just like this term rec centers that were used throughout our communities, those were nowhere near rec centers. And so I would hope we could get a consensus to really move forward with a plan to bring a state-of-the-art type facility. And as I said, there were some plans that were shared. Okay. Also, with the Cavalier Manor, there were also plans that were shared beyond renovation. And so if you could also, if we have a consensus of council, to look into those plans as well, and as we start putting in place CIP. And so I think those two rec centers should be addressed.
We'll go and pull those plans out.
Okay.
And see what it would cost, and then bring that back to you.
Could we, could that be on our schedule for our next public work session, council meeting?
Yes, stand by just a second.
Okay.
Do we have access to those plans, Mark?
We have conceptual drawings right now. I don't think we have any design plans at this point.
Okay.
Yeah, it was a conceptual.
Yes, sir.
Yeah.
Okay. Was there any cost put with that, or?
I don't recall off the top of my head if there was an estimated cost.
Okay. We'll pull those out and
Okay.
review it. If we have something that we can bring out,
Right.
we'll definitely do that.
Okay, thank you.
All right.
Councilman Moody, sir, you have the floor. Then Vice Mayor Lucas Burke.
Thank you, Mayor. Great update, Mr. Pomachak. Excuse me, the Cavalier Manor Recreation Center, does that include the swimming pool and the tennis court? Is that included in that renovation?
Not in the current scope, no, sir.
I think we've had citizens say that the swimming pool is in need of renovation, as well as the tennis court. Have we have an estimate on what renovations are needed?
We have an estimate on the tennis courts. We did that not long ago, I want to say in 2016. Those courts got resurfaced. So we can pull that out and let you know what that cost would be. As far as the pool is concerned, that's part of the conceptual study that was done, was to, instead of repairing the outdoor pool, is hopefully to build an indoor aquatic center. So I don't think we've gotten far enough to actually get estimates on cost.
I think it would be good to bring those conceptual plans to council's attention again. I forget exactly what they were, but I think it'd be good. The other thing, lighting at Churchland soccer fields, is that, what's the status on that?
It is currently being designed. They're trying to design it to light at least 4 of their larger fields, and a lot of that ambient light will shine onto the smaller fields as well. Estimated cost, I believe, was roughly $1.2 million for that, but I know engineering is working on that currently.
So that's been going on, what, a couple of years now since?
It's been over a year for sure.
No,
Yeah.
no.
Yeah, because I see kids out there playing and parents that got the headlights on trying to light the field for them. So we can do better than that.
I will say we do provide light towers for them every season whenever it starts to get darker. They were actually starting to get delivered this week. So we provide up to 12 light towers throughout that facility to make sure it's safe to play on.
Okay, so those are in the works.
Yes, sir.
Okay. Also, pickleball is becoming popular everywhere. Do we have any plans to convert any? I don't think tennis courts get the use that they used to. Any plans to convert a tennis court or two to a pickleball court?
It's actually already been done. A lot of localities you'll see use it as a shared court, so you can play either tennis or pickleball on it. The different lines are on there. And we've had at least half of our courts at each location already painted with pickleball lines.
Have we advertised that? Because I'm certain, not that I play pickleball, but I'm just wondering if our citizens know that's available.
We have advertised it, and we also have a pickleball league over at the Sportsplex. Of course, it's indoor, but we make sure we get the word out there as well.
Okay, great, thanks.
Vice Mayor Lucas Burke, ma'am, you have the floor.
Thank you, Mayor, and thank you, Mark, for the presentation, Mr. Pomashak. Question I have, the CDBG funds as well as the ARPA funds were designated for some of the projects, but I didn't see what type of funding is going to be allocated for Cavalier Manor and Joseph E. Parker Centers.
Both of those are through the CDBG funding.
Okay. And do we have a balance on how much is being used or how much is remaining through our CDBG funds?
Mr. Crimer, who oversees the program, works with us very closely to make sure that we're not going over budget for any of the projects.
Okay.
All of the project estimates you see in the presentation, those have been reviewed with him prior to me letting you all know tonight.
Right. Okay, and I know our mayor mentioned last meeting that during one of the mayor's conferences, they mentioned that CDBG funds had not been increased in 40 years, and so it's something that we want to lobby our legislators at the federal level to see that some of those funding could be improved. And I'll be happy to report back. I'm excited about the Charles Peete Center because in my 2013 graduating class of LEFCO, we did some baby renovations. We thought we had done something really good, but I'm glad to see that we're getting some real renovations that are done now. But in looking at the picture, it's coming off of Portsmouth Boulevard. That's going to be a parking area as well as the one off of Elliott Avenue.
Yes, that is correct. In order to fit all 4 fields on the site, the orientation they are now is the way they had to be. So that parking lot off of Portsmouth Boulevard is actually going to be right next to where the planned future fire station is going to be. So we're going to have access on both sides of the facility.
Okay, very good. Thank you. Good report.
Councilman Tillett, sir, you have the floor.
Thank you, Mayor. Thank you for this presentation, Mr. Pomachuk. I have a question in regards to Prentice Park. It wasn't included in the packet, but if we could receive an update on the status of the park on the other side of Prentice Park, not the Highland and Lansing, but the one by, I think it's Mount Calvary. If we can get that update at the next council meeting, just on the status of that and, you know, the timeline of what that looks like. In addition, I also support my colleagues' statements in regards to the Cavalier Manor Recreation Center with the conceptual plans. And then finally, I know that landscaping and grass also falls under Parks and Recreation. And so, and I'll send a list to the city manager as well, but there are a lot of properties across the city that are city property that the grass is kind of out of control, as well as trees. And so I know that gets contracted out, but ultimately, you know, it falls under your department. So I will send that to the manager and see if we can get those things addressed.
Thank you.
Councilman Hugel, sir, you have the floor.
Yeah, thanks, Mr. Mayor. So, Mr. Palmachuk, appreciate the brief. We don't get you at the podium very often, so I was going to do this later, but I'll do it now since you're here. I attended the Fall Festival Saturday. It was great. So I want to compliment you and your team. I know you guys pulled that together. We had lots of kids out there, and they were having a great time. But as I think back over the last several months, Sunset Thursdays and Coast Guard City Recognition and every parade that comes along, you and your team are in the middle of making sure that things get set up and torn down. A lot of times on Saturdays and Sundays, sometimes in pretty crummy weather. And so I want to thank you and your team for always being there and making this stuff go. It's keeping all of us busy on the weekends, doing fun things around Portsmouth, and it's you and your team that do a lot of that behind the scenes work, so thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Appreciate you, brother.
Dr. Whitaker, sir, you have the floor.
This is for the city attorney while we're talking about parks. Any update on the historical designation of the Mount Herman Park, which is now the Bernard Griffin Park?
Yes, sir. Thank you for that question, Dr. Whitaker. We have a new liaison with the department. The prior person retired, and so they are getting up to speed. One of the things that they have looked for, as I've brought before the city before, are photographs, historical renderings of what Mount Herman Park looked like over time. We were able to get a production put together by the outstanding marketing team. The very people who are in this back room recording this now have put together an advertisement to the city, and it's on the YouTube channel. It has been rotating. And I'll say here to the public that if you have any photographs of any at all of Mount Herman Park or Bernard Griffin Park, please send that to the city attorney's office. We're at 801 Crawford Street, or you can send it to J. Miller or Miller J at portsmouthva.gov. And so once we have all that information, that's the last of it, then they will make their determination. So far, so good.
Is there any update we can get from that actual agency that is reviewing it, that they can send something in writing in regards to where we are in the process?
We have it in writing. I can forward it to full
Okay,
council.
all right.
I'll do it before the end of the
Okay,
session.
thank you.
And while I have the floor, may I?
Madam Attorney, you have the
I don't get to participate in the discussions, but I do want to let you all know that I'm very thankful for the special needs services that Parks and Rec does. The Portsmouth Public Schools services 14,000 children. 12% of them are special needs or somehow receive those services. So that's roughly 1,700 children that go in and out of these facilities. The ADA compliance is critical. I would put a pitch in for a more therapeutic setting at our therapeutic center at Craddock Rec Center. I know there are lots of organizations that use that center for special needs kids. I just had a soccer game all fall and spring long there with some of the programs such as Complete the Puzzle and Facts and all these other programs that help children with special needs here in this city. So I will encourage you that when you are looking, as it is a legal requirement, that you provide services for all children, as you know, that you also include some therapeutic amenities throughout the rec centers, not just at the one therapeutic center. Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Attorney. And one other thing, couple of things, Mr. Pomarchik. First of all, I do want to congratulate you and your team once again on the award that you received from the Virginia Recreation and Park Society. That speaks to not only your leadership, but to your team and the passion and commitment that they put to making sure that we have Parks and Rec programs that meet the needs of our children and our families. So I want to give you a round of applause on that, sir.
Thank you. I have a great team.
You really do. And in addition to that, I know Dr. Whitaker mentioned this, but it was something that we had talked about, and I know Councilman Tillage has mentioned this. So the concept of a citywide rec facility, state-of-the-art, with that swimming pool we talked about, that regulation-sized swimming pool, so that our young people, our high school students, can have a place to compete in their swimming. In addition to that, many of our children need to learn how to swim. So I know that's something we talked about conceptually, but really excited about bringing back some ideas of a citywide rec facility that can meet many of those recreational needs that we have. But the investment that the city has made in our Parks and Recreation Department, I know has been very robust, and we're grateful for you and your team for carrying it out and making it happen. So thanks again, sir.
Thank you.
Mr. Carter, sir, you have the floor.
Thank you, Mark. Great presentation. One of the things that we're challenged with right now is trying to find an event center that is large enough to host something for our city. When we try to do events, especially the only places we have right now are outside venues. And if the weather don't cooperate, we end up having to move it and move it. So what we're in search right now of some place that will, an event center that we can use that would host us. So one of the things that we're kind of thinking of as we're revamping all of our facilities is how do we create a facility that we own that we could actually do that in. So that's something that we're looking at right now. So it will be an event center. So that is something that, but we need one. We don't have a facility that can handle that. So that's on our list too. All right.
Hold on, sir. Mr. Barnes, sir, you have the floor.
Would that be an opportunity for a convention center?
At this moment, we have no idea what it's going to be. All I know is we don't have what we need. So there's an opportunity for something. Okay.
I think a convention center would be something that could take care of that need, but also open us up to some of the things that I talked about in my time at the beginning on council, as far as having like a sportsplex. And if you go to like Hampton Coliseum, that turns into a sportsplex, a 12-goal sportsplex, which is revenue for the city, but also give us that opportunity to have those events and other type of special events that we can bring to the city. So I would definitely be in favor of something like that.
Sure. Thank you.
Mr. Carter, sir, you have the floor.
All right, we are near the end. Our city assessor is going to come and give us a presentation on the open space policy. Again, this is a generic presentation, does not actually try and address any one specific property, but just to give information about what the open space policy is all about. Mr. Edwards?
Thank you.
Welcome, sir.
Thank you. Let's get this right now. All right. Good evening, Mayor, Vice Mayor, members of council. This is going to be a brief presentation on the overview of open space, land use, which I use interchangeably a lot because open space is a portion of land use. Need the clicker. So what is open space? The term open space, as defined by the state, refers to land that is not intensely developed for residential, commercial, or industrial uses. The land can have buildings, however, they have to be no more than 10% of the total site. Examples from the state are parks and athletic fields, playgrounds, botanical gardens, golf, swimming, and country clubs, along with yacht clubs. The land use was passed by the state in 1974. They passed legislation to enable localities to provide tax relief to landowners in order to preserve agriculture, horticultural, forestry, and open space. And when we're speaking specifically of open spaces, that's the only one we actually participate in. And it requires a minimum of 5 acres for open space, and that includes if you have the home site pulled out, it still has to meet the 5 acres of open space. There are some exceptions to size that would be done by ordinance, such as being along a scenic highway, a river, or by the Virginia Outdoor Plan. Or if you're in a very densely populated town that has more than 5,000 people per square mile. An ordinance, An ordinance authorizing use valuation does not automatically apply such taxation to the qualifying parcel. The owner of the parcel must file an application with the assessor's office, and we will review to make sure it meets all the criteria, which we'll get into in a little while. And then the big question I hear a lot, are localities required to adopt a use value program? And answer is no. It is actually the adoption of a use value taxation is voluntary action on the part of the jurisdiction. So that's something that was actually done by the city of Portsmouth in 1973. And if you recall, back here, the state did it in 1974. So the only conclusion I can have is that the state is on a calendar year and the city is on a fiscal year. So I guess through the legislative package in 1973, the council must have known it was coming and went ahead and provided the ordinance. I was 2, so I don't recall. So we're, all right, and then the authority and responsibilities upon me come from the city code 35101 through 35106. And that's where they detail the assessment of the use value of assessment of certain real estate. And they are derived from the state code 58.1, 32.30, and 3231. And we're going to get into that a little bit. I'm not going to read this whole thing, but 3230 basically gives the definition of the classifications of real estate that are going to be in the use value. And 3231 is where it breaks down to give the city the authority to provide an ordinance to participate in the use value program. Now, when we get into the city code, 35-101 is the actual ordinance the city did to participate in the land use value program. And then it goes through 102 and 103 are the application process, which goes through me and how I verify it. And then 104 breaks down all the steps that I'm required to go through. As such, the number one is I have to make sure it meets the criteria that the state has set forth in 3230, which defines what open space is. Then once I determine that, I have to make sure it does meet all the minimums and falls that are required by the state with regards to the 5 acres. And then it keeps going as just a lot of legal stuff going on. And then the big thing is in section number 3, it is subject to a recorded perpetual easement that is held by the public body and promotes the open space use classification as defined by the Code of Virginia. That recorded commitment is entered into with the landowners and city council or its authorized agent. In the past, it generally runs through the city attorney's office and the city manager's office. And that commitment can be anywhere from a minimum of 5 years to a maximum of 10 years. And then we get to 105, which is how it is entered into the land book. And this is where you get the very specific. You have to have a market value. You have to have a use value, both of which go into the land book. And if they pass the application process and are granted the use value, then the taxes are based off of the use value. But it's important to have the market value because if they come out of compliance, then we have to apply a rollback tax for the prior 5 years, and that's the difference between the market value and the use value. So that could be if the taxes on the use value are, say, $4,000 a year, and the taxes on the market value are $40,000 a year, you would do for 5 years, you would go back and it would be at $36,000, and you have a interest rate of 10% per annum on each year that you're going back in arrears to collect that. And that 10% is set through our code and through the state. And just to summarize real briefly about the open space, for the program to be in use, the city council must enact the program via ordinance. The entity seeking to participate in this program works with the city attorney's office to draft an open space agreement. After completion, the city manager reviews and signs off on this agreement, and it is recorded with the clerk of the circuit court. Can be, again, 5 to 10 years, and that's how it has historically been done through the city attorney and through the city manager. However, it does say that they work with council or someone council assigns. And then once it's recorded, it gets into my court, and I'm required to send an application annually 60 days prior to the effective date of assessment, which is January 1st. So I have to have an application mailed to them and received back by November 1st. I have to review the application for accuracy and make sure that everything they put is correct. If there's any misstatements, then they could be removed from the program. I have to, once all that's done, I review to make sure that there is a recorded instrument in the courts and it is within the time frame that I'm reviewing the application. Once that is done, I review the SLEAC, which is the State Land Evaluation Advisory Committee. They have a manual and also a website where we can go in and we find Portsmouth and find the rates for open space, and we apply that to the acreage on the card. And open space only applies to land, not buildings. Buildings are always done at market. And then at the request of the city manager, he asked me to look through the city and see what I could find that may qualify for land use. And I looked, and I originally sent him a list of about 16 properties, but as I weeded through them, I found some that once you take the home site out, they no longer would meet the 5 acres. There were several that I looked at that were currently under development, which throws them out. And there were 3 that were in litigation for unpaid taxes and 2 that had more than 2 quarters worth of taxes not paid, so they're also thrown out. So that left me with just 5 properties in the city. And on the map, it's not a very good map, but it's just trying to show the whole city and where they were. They're all actually in the Churchland area. And then you can zoom in on them, and I know my understanding is the one on University Boulevard is actually getting ready to have something built on it, so that's probably going to be out shortly. And then there's one on Hatton Point and Gulf Street. That's common ownership, and it's a relatively large parcel, but it only has 1 house on it. And then there's one on West Norfolk Road, was purchased by a church for them to build their church. And then the one on Cedar is also, I think my understanding is they were looking at putting multifamily on it, but I haven't seen anything come through for that yet. And that's the very brief overview of just the program itself. I'm sure there's going to be plenty of questions. So.
Dr. Whitaker, you have the floor, sir.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Edwards. So that the citizens that are listening are clear, because much of what you just described probably went over many persons' heads. The open space, this land use, the purpose of what it does for the landowner is that it gives the landowner a significant tax cut in their real estate tax. Is that correct?
Yes, sir.
All right. So I want to make sure this is a program that gives landowners a tax cut, significant tax cut. You have here listed that in 1974 that Virginia passed the legislation. The state of Virginia passed the legislation that enabled localities to provide this tax relief, but it is not required.
Correct.
Based on the history of this open space and land use, it was originally adopted to apply to agriculture, such as farmers. And therefore, the farmer gets a significant tax break on their land because the farmer is providing a benefit to the citizens. If the farmer were taxed at the fair market value of all of those acres of land, that farmer will have to pass that cost off to the consumers, which would require consumers to pay a higher price for their food. And so therefore, what this does is allow for those farmers to have a decrease, significant decrease in their tax, real estate tax, and for consumers not to bear that burden. My issue with Portsmouth is the question of why would Portsmouth, being a landlocked city that already has significant amount of land that is tied up by the federal government, why would Portsmouth want to enter into an open space agreement that now causes for a property to not be taxed at its fair market value and then multiply that by the real estate rate, but it gets a significant deduction and it is not based on the value and therefore a lower tax. It's a tax cut. And I don't see anywhere in here, nor have I heard you present anything, whereby there is a measurement whereby we determine whether it's feasible for Portsmouth to even give that type of tax based on some type of return on the investment. And that has not been presented.
Yeah.
And at this point, in Portsmouth, there's only one property that falls under the open space. And my consternation about all of this is the same issue we're dealing with at the federal level, that this next election is going to determine whether the wealthy will continue to get tax cuts or not. And I do not think that the citizens of Portsmouth who are struggling to pay taxes, real estate taxes, should be subsidizing the taxes for an open space use, particularly since 99% of the citizens of Portsmouth don't even benefit from it. And so that's my concern, that the open space use is a bad public policy for Portsmouth because the citizens bear a tax burden of subsidizing something that they don't benefit from. And so I would hope that my colleagues, that we would look at terminating this open space use, and that if it is applied, that there needs to be some significant measurement or justification as to why we would be given this significant tax break and requiring our citizens to subsidize it. And so I want to express that, because what you presented to us was just the nuts and bolts of it. But council is the legislative body, and we deal with policy. And the question becomes, should this be a policy that a city like Portsmouth should have in place? Maybe a city that has some significant returns on these types of cuts could justify it, but there has been no data presented to the city that justifies this type of tax cut.
Thank you, sir. Vice Mayor Lucas Burke, you have the floor.
Thank you, Mayor. I think Dr. Whitaker expressed my sentiments very well. The question I was going to have is that on the map overview of potential partials for open use, open space land use, there were 5 that are there, and how many properties is it applicable to? Is it only 1? No?
Those are the 5 that I have identified that, if they decided to apply, would have a good shot. I haven't reviewed them thoroughly to see, and they would have to work through putting the easement on them to prevent them from utilizing them
Okay.
for anything other than open space.
Right. So do we have any properties in the city of Portsmouth currently that are applicable, that are using the open space?
Just one.
Just one. Okay, and when the open space is identified, was it already identified or was it later identified? Because we had a gentleman, a citizen came and read a letter to us at the last council meeting, and it stated that this one person, on one space use, had overpaid. And I believe that it might not have been an overpayment, but a rebate So was a rebate issued after the fact, or how was it identified that a rebate needed to be done? Was an application put in and it was denied, or it didn't get looked at until later? Or just how did that overpayment happen? Because the letter was sent, I thought, confidentially to city council, but somehow it was leaked to a citizen who came to the city council and read it back to us verbatim.
I would have to defer with the city attorney, since that property is in litigation, as to whether I can answer.
Madam City Attorney, you have the floor.
I've already advised the members of council and staff that this case is under the subject of litigation. The facts around how the property became under open space is available to be discussed, for sure, what you've done. I think that's what Vice Mayor is asking. So I think you can answer factually, but I wouldn't get into the specifics of the.
Oh, no, I didn't want any specifics of the legality, but since a citizen bought the letter that was sent to the council and read it verbatim to us, he had more information than some of the members of the council. So we was wondering how an overpayment was applied when it seemed to have been a rebate on something that was later done.
I had been asked to review the open space once before and had found an error. And upon correcting that error, that was what generated how do I say it?
So it wasn't an overpayment, so the error resulted in a rebate, which
Yeah,
gave them additional money back.
There was found that you're supposed to have a market card, which is there for market value only. That was also generating a tax bill along with the use card. And only the use card should have been generating a tax bill.
Okay. So you were able to find that error and
Yes.
apply it?
Yes.
Okay, so it wasn't an overpayment, it was a rebate?
Yes, they were erroneously charged on parcel A when it should have been parcel B.
Okay, thank you.
Councilman Moody, sir, you have the floor.
Well, I was here when the letter was read. Each member of council got a copy of that letter. It was not read verbatim at all. And what is this rebate or overpayment? But what, at the end of the day, what does the owner do?
He was, based off of what I found, the market card had been erroneously charged for 2 or 3 years that he paid on and shouldn't have, and he had to get a rebate, abatement, however you want to term it, on that property. And the use value card was supposed to be done at a certain rate, and it was done at a different rate than what it was supposed to have been done at. So that one was also being overdone based on the policy.
Well, beyond the market card and all of that, at the end of the day, how's the owner going to be made whole?
I'm gonna ask any comment or questions about what happens with the owner outside of, that's a personal tax discussion that's not appropriate for open session. So respectfully, I can provide you some information under a attorney-client memo to you and to council, but we shouldn't be discussing that in public.
Well, that's good. Everybody up here and probably half the audience knows who we're talking about, but I'll concede.
Thank you, sir. Dr. Whitaker, you have the floor.
Yes, again, my comments go to the policy. We've had at least five city assessors who have given a different interpretation and application of this open space. Again, it's a bad policy. There are no measurements that we know of that you use or any other assessor use to determine whether the open space should or should not be granted. And also, before we call on citizens to subsidize the taxes of someone else, we should make sure that that subsidization is based on some type of return that the city is receiving. And up to this point, there's been no evidence of it. There's been inconsistent application of it, and it's even become political. And so, again, I would recommend to my colleagues that we would take forth a motion, put on our agenda to terminate the open space policy, and that would be an item on our agenda at our next council meeting, after also getting some consultation from our city attorney. We have already had some consultation and to regards of the consequence of that. And so I would like for that to be something, but I just want our citizens to be clear that that is a tax cut, that it has not been justified. And for those of us who've been out here on the early voting, the main question that citizens keep asking us is, how are we going to get our taxes cut? Well, how are we going to cut taxes while at the same time subsidizing taxes for those who should be paying them at fair market value? I think it's unfair, and I think it's unjustified. And I just can't see how struggling citizens would want a council to give that type of tax cut. And if we're going to debate it at the federal level, and for many of us who know what the Trump administration will represent, then don't come to the local level and ask us to do what you're saying that Trump shouldn't be doing, and that is giving tax cuts to the rich. And I didn't come on council to do that. And so I hope that we will be able to put that and vote on that as an agenda item.
I just want to clarify. I just want to clarify something.
That's not to
I'm
you.
not
That's
policy.
not to you. That's not to you. That's a comment. I didn't ask
Okay,
a question of you. It's a comment, but it is concerning to me that you have come across something that mysteriously 5 other assessors had not, and so that's very clear. But no, there's no question to you.
Lots of experience.
Yeah, so did they.
Thank you, sir.
So did they.
Got for it.
Yeah.
Thank you, sir. Mr. Carter, you have the floor.
Thank you, Mr. Edwards. One of the things that I'm going to ask is there a desire of this council to move anything forward on the statement made by Dr. Whitaker? I'll need some directions whether or not that we're going to move forward in any way on this. That was not a policy decision presentation. That was to give you information so you can make a policy decision. So,
Yeah, well, that's an issue for council to put on the agenda. So that's it's nothing for you to move forward on. That's something that council would need to put as an agenda item to vote on.
That was my point.
And
Yes,
that's
sir.
why I said after hearing from our city attorney, then is that being an agenda item and discussing that it be on our next council agenda. Yeah.
All right.
And that wouldn't be today to discuss that. Right, right.
Mr. Carter, you have the floor, sir.
Thank you, sir. One last thing. I am delighted to present to you Mr. Herb Robinson. He is the new General Services Director. Born and raised in Portsmouth, been around for a long time, worked for the school system for a long time, has done a tremendous job for us since coming on board. Wanted to introduce to you Mr. Herb Robinson, the new General Services Director. Thank you. That's it, Mayor.
Congratulations on the promotion, sir. We do have a need for a closed session. At this time, I would ask the Vice Mayor to please read the closed session motion.
Thank you. I move to go into a closed meeting pursuant to Virginia Code subsection 2.2-3711A8 for the purpose of consultation with legal counsel employed by the city regarding specific legal matters requiring the provision of legal advice by such counsel specifically regarding collective bargaining.
Second.
We have a motion for close and a second. I would ask that my colleagues please vote electronically.
This item has been adopted 7-0.
Yes, we are in closed. Read the motion.
Yes. I hereby move that each council member certify that to the best of his or her knowledge, one, only public business matters lawfully exempted from open meeting requirements under the Virginia Freedom of Information Act, and two, only such public business matters as were identified in the motion by which the closed meeting was convened were heard, discussed, or considered in the closed meeting just concluded.
Thank you. We have a motion and a second. I would ask that all of my colleagues please vote electronically.
This item has been adopted 7-0.
Thank you, Madam Clerk. That concludes our public work session for today. We will end the meeting and we will reconvene at 7:15. 7:15 on the clock on the wall.